In this week's Pierson Workholding Q&A, I tackle 3 big questions about machining business in general. Let's get started. First question, how do you launch a product or business? Number 2, if you're in business already, when should I hire my first or next employee? And third question, what was your process in deciding to allocate resources and time towards things that take both when there isn't cash flow? So first of all, how do you launch a product or business? Now, good question. I started this business making mountain bike suspension upgrade linkages. I didn't know anything about machining, and I didn't rush out to buy a machine. What I did is I did what I did best and designed them, had other machine shops make them. I would anodize them, laser engrave them, and then sell them on eBay. Now, I stumbled across a good strategy there. A lot of times guys have an idea for a business. YouTube is so much more accessible. It provides a great educational platform. So they just naturally go out, buy a machine, and make products and hope it sells. I didn't have the skill or money almost 20 years ago when I got into machining. So I kind of did the right thing. Now, when I realized the products were selling, that's when I bought my first machine. So my first bit of information or advice would be, don't buy equipment just because you have an idea. My next piece of advice is don't go into debt to buy equipment. When you go into debt, you are ensuring the growth of someone else's business, not necessarily your own. Now, my first machine, yes, I got a loan to purchase it because I had no money and it was a calculated risk. I knew that there was a product that sold at a certain price. I knew that was a fairly stable sales number, and I knew X number of suspension linkages that I needed to sell to break even, and break even analysis is huge. What I didn't take into account was everything else, the things like overhead, power. Another thing I see a problem with people just starting out in business is they have an idea, they sell it too inexpensively. They go, well, I'm going up against this competitor and I want to undercut them just a little bit. If you are making a great product and you have value to offer your customers, price is not an issue. Perfect example. We have our mini pallet systems and our pro pallet systems. I did a Q&A video about this a few weeks ago. What I forgot to mention is that the Pro sells 10 to 1 over the Mini. Why? Because the Pro offers more value to the customers. It's almost double the price, but the Mini is for someone that's in that first gear of starting the business. Look, I only got about $1,200. I know I need to palletize because I cannot stand in front of this machine all day and all night long. I need to palletize, swap pallets. Okay, so you get the concept. You don't need the high holding forces, the seal, the overkill rigidity, that type of thing. So the Mini is a good fit. The call that I get a lot is, hey, I bought a Mini a few months ago. Do you have a trade-in program? No, we don't have a trade-in program. But the bigger point is the Pro, you start out with the great system. It offers a better value. We have a direct sales model, so we can beat the competition. We don't have too much competition on pallet systems, but we can beat the competition on product value and that price point because they're all selling through manufacturers, reps, and distributors and crazy business models. So there's a lot of different ways you can compete, but make sure you price it right, not just to sell product, but to grow your business. You've got to make a living. You've also have to have retained earnings to reinvest back into your business. Something that I feel is more important is the term MVP. Now, you've probably heard in business, MVP stands for minimum viable product. Okay, it's a minimum, at the most minimum stage, is this a viable product that I can sell? I am much more concerned and which carries more weight on this next MVP. minimum viable process. So what is minimum viable process? I define it as the act of collecting all the relevant information and data so you have a firm understanding from start to end of what it's actually going to take to bring that product to market. That means material pricing, lot sizes, information from your outside vendors, boxes, shipping, weight, all that stuff. If one of those things snags you, especially at the point of like boxing them up, or parts are getting damaged in transit, it does not matter. That process is broken. The process starts from when material comes in our back door and lands on our customer's front porch, back door, dock, or whatever. We need to understand every aspect and collect all the data before we move forward into actually investing time and money into producing a product. For example, one of the components we make is the shaft that goes into the rotovise. Okay, it's a left-handed thread, it's 4140, it's a very hard shaft. Well, we just cut it up and sent it to heat treater, and they said it doesn't fit in our basket. And we said, what do you mean basket? I thought you just dump it. I didn't know anything about heat treating. They said, well, our basket is unfortunately only 30 inches long. You gave us 36-inch bars. Okay, all right, great. Next time we cut them to 30 inches or 29 inches. And then we got them back and the parts were like candy canes. They were so warped. And we said, what's this? This material's totally warped, it's bent. And they said, well, when we quench it flat in the basket, and then one side cools first and then it bends and warps. We didn't know you needed to cool it straight. Okay, so how do we get around that? Well, you need to drill a hole in the end. So the third time we did it, we drilled a hole in the bar, 30-inch long, they heat treated it, they racked it, and then they dipped them, they quenched them vertically. Now the bars come out perfectly straight. We didn't know that process because it was an outside process. When we send parts to our anodizer, now we know that we have these, our own bins that are padded so that when we send it to them, they don't get scratched. When they come back, they don't get scratched. Our anodizer was able to lower their prices because they put them in padded bins that we supply to them, and they don't have to wrap them individually. Getting all that process down, because a vendor that says, oh, you know what, sorry, your parts are done, but we just need to wrap them, and we have two people that wrap parts, and one of them is sick today and the other has a day off. All right, well, didn't know that either. So it's understanding not just relationships with your vendors, but how you do things in-house. That is a make or break thing, is that minimum viable process, knowing all the factors of how you can get a product through your shop, through your value stream, and into inventory, into the assembly, into a box, into the customer's hands. A lot of times in business, you're going to be doing everything, you're going to be machining, doing everything, but if your process isn't dialed in, you are going to experience so many problems, not just in the process now, but in the future. That's why we practice lean, because the process is so important. We say around here, the process is the boss. Now, I'm the owner of the company, but I'm not the boss. The process is the boss. When I want to go out and make a widget or prototype something on my mill, I have to ask my shop foreman, hey, can I use the mini mill? Hey, can I use the VF2C? And sometimes he says, no, it's scheduled. And I go, okay. And I have to yield to the process. So keep that in mind, minimum viable process. Okay, next question. When should I hire my first employee or hire my next employee? Now, my advice for the first employee is to take a step back. In last week's Q&A, you heard me talk about lean and how that changed the process and life of our business, quite frankly. It is really easy for a solopreneur to get caught up in doing a lot of work, but a lot of the wrong work, a lot of inefficient work. So my first piece of advice is to step back, look at your whole operation, go, where am I spending a ton of time? How can I be more lean in that area? What can I stop doing? What should I start doing? And how should I treat myself? Like I always tell myself, I need to have a CEO mentality. I should be doing the things that grow the company, the visionary type stuff. I should not necessarily be running machines, programming machines, packaging orders, answering phones all the time. Now I have my hands on all of that, but to really grow the company takes delegation. It takes dismissing ideas that instead of me, oh, I got an idea, I'm gonna run after that. No, just put it aside, back burner it. It really takes that intentional effort, that vision cast to your employees. So obviously this question is dealing with not having employees. Do that first, have that CEO mentality, and if you could defer something or delay it, or even, for example, payroll. As a small business owner, if you have several employees, the best thing to do is to get a payroll company to do that. We use Gusto, not endorsing them or anything, just easy interface. That really helps. Taxes, I did TurboTax for years because I just had when I was first starting out, the mentality of just doing it all. Terrible mistake. I didn't get audited, I didn't make mistakes, but a really good CPA can really help you with your tax savings. In fact, the first time I went to a legitimate CPA, he says, oh, wow, why weren't you doing this, this, and that? Well, I didn't know what I didn't know. And he said, no, we gotta incorporate you. We gotta set up you on a W-2 is gonna be good. And that's a whole nother talk right there. But look at your current workload, what's on your plate, see what inefficiencies there are. Now, when you think that you have gotten more efficient when you're not doing things you shouldn't be doing, you have to build in a buffer. So don't wait till you're 100% max capacity to hire that first employee. When you hit about the 75%, when you're working just full-time, not overtime, not nights and weekends, that's when you should be hiring. You should start looking about 60, 70% capacity. When you hit that 75, 80, you should have someone helping you. Reason is, you can't just bring in your first employee and then they just work. There's gonna be training, there's gonna be finding out their habits, getting along. Your work hours may shift. My first employee was a night person. A morning person. I'm a night person. We had to figure out what works best. And little things like that. So you need to build in that 25% buffer to give up your time to train them so that you can then be freed up by their skill, their labor, so that you can put that CEO hat back on and start building the business by working on it, not in it. Okay, now final question. What was your process in deciding to allocate resources and time towards things that take both when there isn't cash flow? Now, I originally got this question when I spoke in Chicago at the event that John Saunders with NYC CNC hosted. I'll put a card up here and a link to that video in the description below. I was asked this. I gave an answer. It's haunted me for a solid 6 months. I feel I have a better answer now. So my business story was to, first of all, not get into debt. When I did get into debt, it wasn't massive debt, it was manageable debt. When I took on a machine payment that was $864 a month for the next 5 years, which is crazy at the time, it was very much calculated, and I knew that it would allow us to produce a new product that we only needed to sell 1.5 units, no, one unit per month to break even, and then we could roll the rest into paychecks, overhead, reinvesting into new equipment, and so that was a calculated risk. But when you don't have time or money to roll into a company, now what do? Here's how I would answer that better. Don't do it. That sounds crazy, it sounds simple, but don't do it. That sounds negative, but here's the flip side. Have someone else do it. Okay, so you pay a shop, but I don't have money to pay a shop to make the products. Well, if you don't have money to pay a shop to make products, let's say it's spinners. If you don't have a shop that you can pay to make spinners, you should not be making and selling spinners. There's in business, there's always expenses that pop up. You may use your last penny to buy material, the machine, and some tooling. Guess what? You're gonna break that tool. You're gonna break that drill. You're gonna scrap material. It's just inevitable. So you need a little bit of float there. On the time side, that's just a straight up call to hustle. When I was single and starting this business, I worked for days and days and days and hours and nights. doing two things, producing product and self-educating myself, just so I could get to a point of building a business, learning. And you know what? A lot of that stuff wasn't profitable, but I had time and energy, not a lot of money. So I was gonna pour that time and energy into educating myself. So it's gonna take just a lot of hustle. Now, when I got married, dialed back. I didn't bring work home at night. I purposely left my laptop at my office because I wanted to be the best husband I could. You know, working in this industry, I have met so many men that are on multiple marriages and don't have good relationships with their kids because they work their tail off. For quality of life, I honestly don't think it's worth it. So if you're gonna do something, you have to calculate the risk. You have to have that extra buffer of money to either keep on hand if you do have a business going, or to pay someone else to get your idea off the ground, or that extra buffer of time. The wife and the kids go to baseball practice on Tuesday and Thursday. You don't need to be there. Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's hustle time. That's where you get back into the company and you do that. Me being a night owl, pretty much all the products in the company were designed between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. That was the quiet time, no phones, no emails, and I could get a lot done. I paid the price the next morning or for days on out, but that's just what you do when you're young and hungry and you don't have all the resources. You have to hammer, you have to work hard, you have to be smart, build in buffers. But from a deathbed perspective, don't neglect things. Don't put your family in debt, don't go into debt. That has long-lasting years, if not decades, ripple effects if you file a bankruptcy or if you neglect your wife, children, family like that. So that's my whole kind of holistic psychobabble stuff, if you will, advice on all that. So yeah, you just got to hustle, build in buffers, and sometimes you just need to think, well, it's an idea and it might end up hurting me in the end. It's just not worth it. Trust me, more ideas and innovative minds are always going to flow. So hope that helps. Hey, if you liked what you just heard, hit that subscribe button. I always want to share how we built this business, not necessarily give a lot of advice of what you do. So if you're into this thing, hit the bell so you'll be notified when the next video comes out. And until then, go innovate your production.